How's everyone doing today for the last session of Thursday? Everyone got enough caffeine? It's been a long 2 days, 3 days if you've been doing the workshops. So today we're going to talk about Rocketman Command Center. Myself, Chris Schasse, is the host. I'm already messing up. My name's Chris Schasse. I'm the owner of Rocketman Tech. My experience is I've been using Jamf Pro about 10 years. In that time, I've been a pro services engineer. I've also been on the education services side of things when I worked at Jamf from 2015 and 2017. And as I jumped off to be a contractor and starting this company, my focus has kind of shifted to doing Jamf Pro health checks and helping companies with their Jamf Pro servers. So my unique perspective has kind of been seeing the bad things that people do in their Jamf Pro servers to kind of, as we've been doing those health checks and coming into the servers. I'm also here with Patrick Blackmore. He's been heading up our development team. Last couple years, we've been building products to work with Jamf Pro servers, which is what we're going to talk about today. As I mentioned before, we're Rocketman Tech, Apple-only, Jamf-only MSP, focused on helping companies succeed with Jamf. And today we're talking about Rocketman Command Center. Just getting a pulse from the room, who here is currently using Rocketman Command Center in their Jamf server? All right, all new people, this is great. Who has heard of Rocketman Command Center before? We've got a lot of people who've heard of it. That's good. And who is hearing about it for the first time? Cool. So a couple less people. So we got a good mix in the room. So if you were the type of person that just wants to take a look at it while I'm talking, we've got a link right here, rkmn.tech/RCC. That link will be in the corner of the screen, so you can take a look at the GitHub page and start fooling around with it. But before we get into what RCC does, we want to talk about why we built this platform. So like I said, with my unique perspective of being able to see the good and bad and the ugly that people do in their Jamf Pro servers, one of the biggest things we saw as a security risk and just general causing issues with the Jamf server is bash scripts. Although bash scripts are arguably the most powerful part of Jamf Pro, it's also one of the things where people can do some of the stupidest things, right? You can write a bash script that says rm-rf/, and that will probably cause some problems on your computers. So some of the main things we see is people accidentally copying client credentials from, for us, like if we're working as an MSP in multiple servers, that's something that people can do. Or if you had a last job and you copied credentials into another server, that's a good way to make sure you've got another job coming up soon. It's also difficult updating scripts across servers, right? Or just like if you have an old script and you need to update it, that can be pretty difficult as well. Every time a new Mac OS version comes out as well, that can cause problems with any bash script you wrote in the past or any bash script a past admin has wrote in the past. And just coding with shell in general can be a little bit cumbersome sometimes, as opposed to working with other more advanced languages like Python and stuff like that have libraries and things. And there's a lot of limitations with shell as well, monolithic code, uncompiled code, lack of libraries I've mentioned before. And also although us as Mac admins are kind of more familiar with bash, across the board, lack of industry expertise. There's a lot more developers that, like to code in things like Python or Swift or stuff like that. So what we've been looking for is to create with RCC is to create something that would be a one-stop shop for Jamf admins that would allow us to not have to rely so much on these bash scripts that have hundreds or thousands of lines of code doing complex operations, and instead being able to create a place where we have the same kind of customizability we have with bash scripts, but being able to do it in a way that's much easier to update moving forward and is much more future-proofed for the general ongoingness of Apple. So what's our goal with this? So like I said, our goal is to create something where we're able to utilize the customizability of Bash while not having to rely on, or not having some of the downfalls and pitfalls that you have with Bash scripts like that. So as we're talking through this presentation, as we're going through all the tools that we can do, and we'll show you what this actually does in a second, but I want you to think, kind of just as a thought experiment, if I wasn't able to utilize Bash within my Jamf Pro server, what types of things would you need RCC to be able to do all the stuff that you want to do? Or what are some things that you actually want to do in your Jamf server and you just don't even have any idea of how to solve that problem that RCC can solve? Because we've got a lot of tools that we built right now, but we want to see what we can build in the future to help everyone in the community to be able to do the things that they want. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick to talk through what RCC actually does and all the tools that we have available with RCC.
Sweet. Thanks, Chris. So, of course, I'm Patrick, and I think this mic is a little too close to my face. How's that? Yeah, so we've built quite a few workflows from the pains we've seen in our own internal workflows and as well with our clients. First one here on the list is App Setup Helper. This is going to allow us to streamline enabling screen recording. I'm sure everyone here at some point has ran into that. You got to enable screen recording and then close out your app to restart, all that jazz. Break Glass Admin, which is an easy way to create a Lapse backdoor admin account. Rapid Response, so instead of waiting around for the next Jamf check-in, it'll immediately execute a script that you insert through the Rapid Response tool the moment that a configuration profile lands on that end user's device. Rename Computer allows you to programmatically rename all these computers based on your specifications or your client's demands. So you can pull down information from the computer, usernames, building codes, et cetera, and insert those straight into the computer's name. Secure token sharing, so if you need to easily enable File Vault on other users, this allows you to use one user to grant another one that token. Self-service email allows you to create pre-filled email templates. That way you always get the exact information you want every time when a ticket comes in. Of course, temporary admin, I'm sure we're all familiar with that workflow. Someone needs to install a program, they don't have administrative privileges, and so they need temporary admin access. Update user info makes it easy for you to find the username and associate it with that email address over in a IDP or other system. Upload Jamf logs allows you to pull any logs on that system and upload it to your preferred destination, so AWS, Amazon, or rather Google Cloud, etc. Now, update computer info. I might have jumped around. Did I do update user info? I did. Update computer info allows the, actually that's called edit, that's called
yeah, that's edit user profile. We changed the name.
Yeah, okay, trip me up. Yeah, so edit user profile, or on this page here is update computer info, pops up a window for the user to fill in whatever additional information they have that might not be up to date in your Jamf Pro server. User privilege management, it's in the name. It allows you to easily target a user and either demote them or promote them to admin. And reset Jamf Connect login, so it brings you back to the macOS login screen. Moving on, I'm going to go ahead and use this guy. So we've taken all these scripts, so you're not juggling a bunch of individual scripts all throughout your Jamf Pro server, and put them into a single binary. Now, this binary is deployed through a package. Later, you can configure a specific tool through a configuration profile. And then you, of course, execute the whole thing through a policy. So we can see here on my server, we have the package uploaded. And we've created a configuration profile in order to define parameters for a specific tool. In this particular example, this is for temporary admin. And if we look down at time min, we can see we are granting that user 15 minutes as an admin. And we're going to ask them for a reason. We've put a string in there to define the question, how we're asking that user to justify their privileges, and a policy to string it all together. So let's focus here on temporary admin. Once again, it grants users temporary administrative rights with limited abilities. So here in this terminal, we made this video a couple months ago, so I can't quite remember exactly what I'm saying, but the user has self-service access to promote themselves. This window pops up where they can justify the reason why they want temporary admin privileges. I just want to show you how neat this is. And they get this window that they cannot dismiss for the duration that they are an admin. We're going to go into settings here, and we can see that that user is now an admin. And we're going to do some, also, they were removed from the static group that they were scoped to, and now their self-service option disappeared. Doing some editing magic, let's make that 1 minute go by a little bit quicker. We'll go back into users and groups to see that that user has been demoted back to standard after that period has elapsed. So lots of hand-holding to explain a fairly simple concept. Expanding a bit more on what temporary admin offers you, you can define the admin duration, define how you prompt for the user's reason. You can decide whether or not you want to remove them from the static group after the period has elapsed. And in order to do so, it requires a client ID and a client secret, since we are interfacing with Jamf Pro through the API. And you can choose to upload logs during that period. Now, you also have some customization options through the dialog itself, so things like the icon, the width, and the height. And in the future, we'll be expanding that level of customizability. Now, break last admin creates and manages a highly configurable lapse backdoor admin account for those emergency situations. So we'll see here in our extension attribute, we don't have a backdoor admin password set. So what do we want to do about this? We're going to go ahead and run the policy through a custom trigger. And upon refreshing, we can see that that user was created. The password that was automatically created for it was put into an extension attribute. And we now have that user available on the device.
Cool, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to yell out at any point or raise your hand and we'll throw you the box.
I do want to chuck this. So break last admin has a couple of options here. You define the username and full name. It gives you account visibility. You're able to define the number of words or characters for the password method. You can choose a random password method or define a known one, and of course you can define whether or not you use a number of minimum, lower, upper, special characters, requires numbers, et cetera, et cetera. Additional features are that there are 7 different password methods built in. It stores these passwords directly in the keychain, and it allows you to create accounts or change the passwords. So if you ever want to do a rolling refresh, there's a password back there. Oh, excuse me, question. Just nice.
Is this on each Mac that you are saying, that break class admin account? On every Mac?
Yeah, so it'd be a policy you deploy through Jamf Pro, and then
Right.
it would put that user account on every Mac with a randomized password.
But don't we have Jamf local admin from the UI itself in the settings that you can put? Is that the similar one? Because
So this is similar. If that works for you, keep using that, because the security and the auditing on the Jamf Labs account is definitely better. We created this before that it was available. Where people have found this useful is when they want more control over when that password gets rotated and how to create that randomized password. So with the Jamf account, with the randomized password, you can't really control it. It's a really long string, which from a security perspective is perfect. But if you want something a little bit more readable, easier to give to people over the phone, we have a lot more customizability with how we randomize that. And then in certain situations, like with schools and stuff like that, this just kind of works better because you don't have to cycle it when someone views it and something like that. So in some ways, it's a little bit more limited. In other ways, it's much more feature-rich with how it works. So depending on your environment, it might be useful
Okay.
versus the Jamf Labs account. But yeah, great question.
Thank you.
Good
All
throw.
right, so I have, I guess, two things. One, the first one is related to the temp admin. You said you guys have some restrictions. I kind of wanted to know what those are. Like, for example, if somebody gets a temp admin account, can they go and make themselves an actual admin afterwards, like their own account, or something like that? And then the second one related to what this gentleman just asked. In our case, in our use case, like I work with Penn State, we have different departments, and some departments have a lot of employees. They don't want to elevate their access in Jamf necessarily. They don't want to elevate everybody's access in Jamf necessarily to get that rotating password. Do you guys have like is this like a set password that you set centrally that you can give out to people? That's the other question.
Yeah. So I'll answer the second question first because it's fresh in our mind. So basically, can you limit who is able to see that password in your Jamf Pro server? And no, not really. Anyone that has read access to computers is going to be able to see that password because essentially it's just an extension attribute. So that's where Jamf's lab solution is definitely stronger because you can say, hey, I want these 10 users to, everyone has read access in your service desk to all computers in Jamf Pro. Jamf actually has a specific thing for their Jamf Labs password. So if you wanted to limit that access, Jamf is the best way to do that.
What I was saying is, like, for example, they don't want to limit necessarily that password access, but they want to limit the user's ability to get into other places in Jamf. So it would be useful for certain service desks in our case, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can limit, if you give someone access to just read computers and nothing else within Jamf Pro, perfect, they can get that password. But if you want to limit, like, I want certain people to have read access to computers but not be able to retrieve those passwords, that's something, unfortunately, we can't do with it. Going back to your first question, if I try to remember it, it's, what was it again, with temporary admin?
Yeah, temp admin. Like, for example, what kind of, you mentioned that there are some restrictions associated with what kind of restrictions do you have? Yeah.
So the way we're doing this with the temp admin workflow is, so one of the ways we do it is on request. So basically, we scope it to a static group that is deployed through self-service. So if you want to give someone temporary admin access, you scope them to that static group. When they run it, it removes them from that static group. But the cool thing about that is now we have this static group where we can give extra restrictions once we give them access to that. So then basically you just add them to restricted software or to a configuration profile that has extra restrictions, so they can't get into users and groups, they can't get into terminal. Can they technically maybe create an admin account still? Yeah, but we can make it really hard for them to do it. If they're a developer, they'll probably figure it out. If they're not, probably not going to figure it out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the questions. Cool. Yeah, so that's break glass admin. And of course, when you run it, you can force password change when password is not known. Another tool here we have in our toolbox is secure token sharing. Briefly mentioned that earlier, where you can pick a user that currently has a secure token and have them grant another user that does not. So here we can see that there's only one file vault enabled user here, which is Schasse. We're going to go ahead and run the policy that uses this tool, where it's going to prompt the user for their password, which will then grant another user file vault enablement. So when we go and refresh this page here on this extension attribute, we'll see that a second user has shown up. There it is, RCC test break glass. So now they are file vault enabled, or rather have the token. So more features here is it allows you to use lapse accounts or a base 64 encoded username and password, or just manually prompting the user as the person or user that currently holds a secure token. And the cool thing there is if you don't know which of those three, if it's a lapse account, if it's some other user you have on the device, or if it's the currently logged in user, you can just tell the tool to use all 3 options, and it'll go down the list until it finds someone. So typically we'll use prompt a user as the last resort to not prompt the user and bother them in any way. And of course, your typical dialog configurations, if you want to customize it with title, text, and icon. And additional features here are that you can define multiple secure token holders, as stated earlier. And the same is true for who you want to grant to. So you can do the same thing. Say you have 5 users on the device, you don't know who has a secure token. You can set all 5 of those as the potential token holders and also redefine all 5 of those as the ones you want to grant to. And then you just guarantee that everyone has a secure token. And yeah, you can pull lapse password from a keychain or extension attribute. Pretty versatile tool. And moving on to App Setup Helper. Of course, this one makes it a lot easier to force users to grant the apps you want screen recording permissions before they have to restart Slack in the middle of a call. So in practice, the user will see this dialog box here, and we've told the app to choose Zoom and Chrome. It'll open up settings here, and until the user checks those off, it'll remain loading. So he just did Zoom, it's now a little green checkbox. And over on Chrome, same deal. Now he can click done and be on their merry way. Ooh, phone just disconnected on the laptop. Yeah, so App Setup Helper allows you to define which app names you want to have this user receive a dialog box for. Timeout, so that way it's not hanging out all day long, and more dialog configurations, title, description, icon, width and height, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty much anything that we throw a dialog box for the user, we try to give you as much customization as possible.
Yeah, I'd like to do more stuff with that tool in the future. It's just like, essentially all it's doing is waiting to see like, hey, did the user do this specific action? So it's really just like, we need to know, is there some type of preference file or something that gets set once the user like logs into an application or sets a different setting, right? So probably gonna expand that functionality soon to maybe just like, if you can define a preference file or something, then you can have it do it for anything, not just screen sharing.
And over here on Update User Info, here you can identify and update the correct username for a logged in user, and Jamf Pro using directory integrations. So you can look up different variations of a username to see if it matches over in your directory. So the user here is not pre-filled in Jamf Pro. We're going to go ahead and run the policy that executes this tool.
Yeah, so it's essentially doing a bunch of guessing, which you'll see here, to try to see like, what is this username? Because my username was Schasse, but my first and last name was Chris.Schasse, or Chris and Schasse, so it's just doing a ton of guessing here. And eventually it arrives at chris@rocketman.tech, which is my actual LDAP username.
Sweet, there it is. After 53 guesses, we found the username. Yeah, it does a bunch of cool mixing and matching. And so, yep, Update User Info does require a client ID and client secret, of course. You can feed in an email domain to use as one of the mixing and matching strings that it'll throw in to find a match. You can define the integration type and also accounts to ignore. Additional features here are that it guesses hundreds of different usernames automatically. It's all brute force, right? And then stops once a successful one is found and adds that username to the inventory record in Jamf Pro. And we have Rename Computer. So this one's a very customizable one. It's in the name. It allows you to use your own naming scheme to customize your macOS computer. In practice, you can see that the computer name is very cleverly called computer name. Go ahead and run the policy that runs this tool. Now, we didn't show what the configuration was for this particular execution, but once we refresh this page, we can see that It picked up the serial number and last name of the user. Is that correct on this one?
Yeah. So this, yeah, and you'll have to look at the wiki for this tool. I may have gotten a little bit too crazy with this one as far as customizability. It's pretty complex in what you can do, both with and without the API. We try not to do anything with the API if possible. This one, we ended up adding it back just if people need it. But you can do a lot through like configuration profiles and using like the variables and throwing like a profile on the computer that we can pull from. So it's a pretty complex tool. But if you want to get any automated naming convention that you could have done with a bash script, you can definitely do it with this tool.
What was this one anyway? Is that just the serial number and the last name?
I think it's the serial number and my username. Yeah, local username. So you can pull from the local username or the username in Jamf Pro. So there's a lot of different ways to do it.
And so, yeah, defines your computer name. You can also choose whether or not it's all uppercase, all lowercase, or just title case. And you can pull from computer record field paths and quite a few other points as well in order to build out your custom computer name. Additional features here are naming scheme tokens, and that's basically what you'll be using to combine a string for that custom username or computer name. Pulling from local computer variables, configuration profile variables, flexible token substitution, and managed substitution. It's a pretty dense tool, so if you go in the wiki, you'll be able to explore more just how versatile the naming schemes can be. And my personal favorite is rapid response. So instantly deploys Jamf policies and simple commands.
Instantly meaning as fast as configuration profiles deploy.
Yeah. So here you can see that we created the configuration profile that will be running a script. I did not see what the script was here, but we'll scope it to the computer that we're currently testing on. Go ahead and add that computer, and as soon as we hit save, we'll see, of course, our managed preferences folder refresh, and we'll hit start a little bit late. But boom, there we go. We see that it created that file over in the bottom right-hand corner. So basically, we just told Jamf Pro to deploy a configuration profile, in which is a command to create that file.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
And so instead of waiting around for a Jamf check-in, you wait around 5 seconds, or as Chris said, as long as it takes for a configuration profile to deploy to your device. So pretty handy when you're in a bind and you really need to do something on that computer. I don't know why Jamf hasn't created something that's a little bit more instant, right? Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Well, it's deprecated now. Yeah, well, it couldn't work across networks. It was basically Apple Remote Desktop.
Oh, nice.
But it was a great tool back in the time.
Took a step back. Yeah, so rapid response, you have a couple actions you can tell the tool to do, which is to load the daemon that is going to be watching for that configuration profile, unload it, or just delete it altogether. You can choose the frequency for it, of course, so once per computer, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, etc., and the command you want it to execute. So it can be as complex as you want. You can run an entire bash script if you want, which is also pretty handy. And then there's an extension attribute that comes along with it, and it allows you to see if there is a launch daemon loaded, and the status, of course, so whether or not it's currently watching, unloaded, absent, or there's an error. And the plist status, as well as the last runtime and the next runtime. So you're always in the loop with whether or not something is loaded in the chamber, right? So we have a bunch of additional tools here we didn't get into, but you guys are more than welcome to hop into that wiki and explore what more we can do. Another handy one here is that self-service email, so you're not just stumbling around trying to get people to give you standardized information in a clean way. And what's coming?
Cool, yeah, I'll talk through what's coming here. All right, so this was all version 1. We have version 2 ready, but I didn't want to quite release it. We're still beta testing, and there's a couple changes I want to make. But version 1 was all written in Python. So basically, once we got some devs on our team, I was like, here's all of our bash scripts, migrate them to this new tool in Python. So that's what they did. After we did that and we started releasing it and realizing the limitations, we were like, we should have written it in Swift, of course. So we have now migrated everything to Swift. and are making some changes there. So version 2 will probably be coming out in like the next couple weeks. I was really hoping it would be done by this presentation, but you only push people so hard. So that's one of the biggest things, and that gives us a lot more abilities to do other stuff. So then we also utilize Swift Dialog because Python is not great at creating GUIs. So I was like, all right, let's just utilize Swift Dialog. It's great. It's open source. We already use it. But we migrated that from Swift Dialog to Swift UI, which is essentially everything kind of looks the same, but it gives us the ability to do a lot more with our GUIs than we were able to do before because we're not limited by Swift Dialog. One of the biggest things that I'm really excited about is encrypted strings, because putting the client ID and client secret into policy parameters or anywhere is not best practice. No one should do it. We allowed it to happen because people wanted to do certain things that it was only possible that way. But now we can actually encrypt strings, and we can encrypt strings in a way, I'll show you in a second how it works, but it doesn't, there's not a way that the user is able to decrypt them like if you do it through a bash script, because you just give them, like you can encrypt a string through a bash script, but you're just going to give them all the things they need to do to be able to decrypt it, so it doesn't really do anything. With an encrypted string through RCC, because we have an application, a CLI application running on the computer, we can fully encrypt it without the user being able to decrypt it because they don't have the private key. And then also what we're calling a dynamic database, which I'll show you as well. So let's take a look at some of these features. So encrypting the client secret looks kind of like this. One thing we didn't show is RCC is a CLI tool. So it's a CLI tool that you deploy through a package to the computer. So if you're running the CLI tool on your computer locally, not the normal way you'd run it, but this is how you start encrypting. So you would run Rocketman, encrypt, and then this is a client secret. So you just throw that in there. It's going to spit out, you know, an encrypted string that you can use. And there's some text at the beginning that just tells RCC, hey, this is an encrypted string. So then when you put it into a managed preference, or you can also do it through a policy, it'll show right here the encrypted string, and RCC will know to treat that like an encrypted string and be able to decrypt that before going ahead and putting the client secret in there. Dynamic database. So one of the issues I've been having as we're trying to use this as a scripting tool is sometimes I'm like, all right, I want to be able to gather some information from the user and then use that in the computer name. But right now we have to do like an API call or something to get that stuff from the computer, which is stupid. So dynamic database is basically putting certain information into a preference file that RCC can then grab. So with Editor User Profile, this is a tool we didn't show, but basically you're able to put information about the computer, or the user is able to put information about the computer that will then get sent to Jamf Pro. Once that happens, then we can run Edit User Profile -- output asset tag, and it'll bring us that asset tag 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we could pipe that into a variable through a script and then be able to grab that all together. So, and you can kind of see there's a lot of different ways to use RCC, but it can become both something that you can just do as like a single line of code, or you can even have it a way of like it being a scripting utility, which instead of running these large scripts with hundreds of thousands of lines of code, it's like you can do this same thing with 2 or 3 lines of code. Cool, and I want to come back to like what I was talking about at the beginning. So when I was talking about that thought exercise of like, if you had to get rid of all your bash scripts and you needed RCC to be able to do everything in your Jamf server, what's missing? What do you need in your Jamf server? So if anyone has anything that they like, there's this thing I really want, raise your hand and we'll throw around the catch box. Also, if you are more introverted and don't want to say anything out loud, we have a little form you can fill out at that link below. But yeah, open it up for discussion. What does everyone else want as a tool for RCC?
I also want to add, oh, go ahead.
One thing that might be nice, I don't know if it would fall easily within the scope, would be a way to, if you would need to mass move policies between categories or do something like a mass delete of policies, that I think would be a nice, because that can be a little cumbersome to do as part of the, through the web interface. Having an easy way to do those multiples, either reassigning or deletion would be handy.
Yeah, definitely. That's not in the scope of this tool specifically because this is for running things on endpoints. But that's something we've been thinking of for another tool that'll just be able to do all kinds of mass actions within Jamf Pro. There's lots of stuff I want to do there with like policy logging, right? It's like sometimes I'm like using, I'll deploy a policy and I get a bunch of failures and I'm like, I want to deploy something new to all these failures. Not a great way to do that. So creating a tool that could go through those logs and kind of get that information, or even be able to parse some of the Jamf logs as it comes through a policy. Yeah, lots of stuff like that.
What about being able to create configuration profiles where, like, setting system settings preferences a certain way, where you get into like the custom stuff in Jamf, where you kind of got to do your custom JSON setups and stuff like that. If you could, say, for this system setting, create a configuration profile like this, and then set it up and go.
Yeah, we have another tool that we talked about in our workshop called Rocketman Auto Deploy, which does kind of those types of things. So it's something where you can set up like a recipe or a manifest that just shows like, hey, this is a configuration profile that I want to set up. And then it would automate that setup for those types of things.
Probably EDU customers will agree with me. Sites, the ability to change sites or automate putting stuff into sites.
Yeah, man, we're getting a lot of things that are more in this like, so this tool is like things that are running locally on the computer, whereas a lot of this stuff is
But even locally, like we don't let every admin move their stuff into their site. We have to move it for them.
Yeah, so I guess explain more about what that would be. Like, is this something where it's running locally on the user's computers when you deploy a script, or?
Yeah, right now, they either have to come to us and we do it in Jamf, or I made a script. They go into self-service and they pick their site.
Oh, yes, that's something that I don't think Edit User Profile supports that yet, doing sites, but that's something that we could add to that tool, so that's a great one. Yeah, just the ability to select the site in there.
Going through my Jamf right now looking for stuff. Manage login items. It would be great to be able, Jamf has made it easy to add, but it would be great to have a tool where it would add an app in manage login items, grab the team ID and get it set, rather than having to redo that profile over and over again to keep adding apps to it.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if there's a way you can script that.
Right.
Or if that's just through configuration profiles.
I don't know.
Yeah,
It would be
that's something
great
we
to be
can
able
look
to
into,
script
though.
it to create a config profile that has that info that you can just keep adding to and adding to that profile.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Anyway, yeah.
I think we saw other hands over here.
I could use a way to kind of clear out a user account when the user logs out. This is for like classroom computer labs or podium computers, where an account is just a standard account and auto logs in, but we want to clear out anything if they downloaded something, kind of like deep freeze, but for just for the account.
Yeah, would that just be completely deleting the account, or would you like to clear out some specific information?
I'd like to clear out specific information and leave the account there.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. We'd probably have to work with you on that to see like what type of preferences do we want to clear out. And the user library gets so complicated when you're trying to clear out certain preferences, like if someone saves a Safari password or something like that, or like the keychain and things. Oh man. But yeah, that would be a good one to work on trying to get. I think a lot of schools with labs would find that useful.
Yeah, we'd use the guest account up until like last week.
Yeah.
But then I found that I couldn't do OS updates with the guest account. So.
Yeah, lots of limitations there.
So this is about checking the compliance status on a Mac by the end user. We use Entra, so any thoughts around that?
Can you explain the question
Oh,
again?
so you have some compliance criteria, right? And you have an IDP. So when the Mac fails to meet any of that criteria,
Yes.
the client doesn't know, the user doesn't know what happened, right? But if they can click on a tool and it can either give them a red or a green, so at least they know, oh, my Mac became non-compliant.
Yeah, okay. So are you using the conditional access with
Yeah.
Jamf Pro and Entra ID?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. We'd have to figure out like what preference files we're able to see and how we're able to see what is compliant or not based on the compliance settings that you have. So that would be an interesting one to try to figure out. I'm wondering if that already exists somehow through Jamf or Entra, but I don't think it does. But there might be some integrations with that too we could use to try to show those status windows so it shows how it can become more compliant.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Any general questions, kind of just fundamentally on how RCC works or anything we talked about? Cool. So kind of we still have about 20 minutes left. So who's interested in kind of seeing how this is set up in the back end? Okay, cool. So I'm going to hand it back off to Patrick to talk through some of that stuff.
Still good to go? Sweet. Cool. Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can go about setting this up. Hold on. You wanted to do the Launchpad? Oh, no, hold
just
on.
exit out of it, yeah. Because we got the windows open.
I am Keynote inept.
Oh no, did it log out of all the stuff?
It did indeed.
Of course that happened, yeah. All right. Yeah.
5, actually.
All right, sorry, we'll have to do it
Anything-
live. You can, yeah.
Whoop. If we see
I
the
should
Slack
have
chat,
saved them all as bookmarks. That would have been smarter.
I could hook up my computer real quick.
Yeah, if that's easier, sure. But it's put away.
So here, we'll just do this real quick. Boop, 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 boop. Seeing the Slack app is like seeing the company nude. All right, so yeah, as you can see here, you upload your package. So we're gonna start with temporary admin, one of the tools inside of RCC. The assumption here is you already have the package on your server. You have some policy already deploying that to your devices.
Yeah, and you can download this package from the wiki or from our GitHub page. If you haven't seen that yet, it's rkmn.tech/RCC. So you can find that. Does everyone know how to find a package in a GitHub page? Perfect. What? Yeah. It's on the releases part. You can click that, click PKG, you're good to go.
Does anyone not know? Might be a better show of hands. We all good?
I always ask the wrong question.
Cool. Yeah, so there's your package here on your Jamf Pro server. And there's a helpful little script we created in order to leverage the script payload in a policy. So if you guys have used script payloads, you've probably noticed that there's those parameter fields in there. And that's a pretty handy thing to use to make it user-friendly to feed in information to a script. So this script allows you to easily use that fancy little GUI so you're not writing another bash script to execute Rocketman. So starting out with temporary admin, one of the things it requires or is useful if you want to do best practices is a static group to scope the devices who are requiring the temporary admin access. So you start out by creating your static group and of course assign your devices, but in this case this is a server with no enrolled devices, so it's assume that this computer's in there. Let's just pretend. And we're going to create a configuration profile to define some parameters for the temporary admin tool. In this, specifically, we've defined the time to be 15 minutes And we've left pretty much everything else as asked for reasons empty because we'll just leave the default value there. We're specifying the group we want to remove, right? So when this is executed on a user's device, they'll be removed from this static group, being the one we created prior. And down in advanced options, the default here, the action is to promote. So during that period, they'll be promoted, of course. And we're not going to upload anything through the upload logs. So this configuration profile just defines these basic parameters for the temporary admin tool.
Yeah, and if you want to scroll up, Patrick, just show the XML as well, the previous preview.
Here you go. So yeah, this right here, time min, if you were to put this in through the CLI, it would be minus time min, right? But instead we're doing this through the groupie list. And you can see ask reasons in there, remove group, specifying the string for the group name, so on and so forth. And of course, we would be scoping this to that static group as well. And moving on to, since we're using a static group, we do need to create an API role and a client to use that role. Otherwise, we can't remove that user from the static group. So here we've created a role and a client to put into that role. And of course, we have a client ID and client secret, which we'll be using later on in this policy. So stringing all of those assets together in this policy, we've added a script payload, and this is where we're going to be using that launch a tool script we showed you earlier. And we have these convenient parameters for us. So the first field here defines the tool, which of course is temporary admin. And this is where we're also putting in the client ID value and client secret value as well. And we're also defining the domain name for that configuration profile we created. So that way, in this situation, the tool's fully aware of what it needs in order to go and do its thing.
So in version 2.0 with the encrypted string, we would want to, you can do it to any value that you want to do. You can encrypt anything for these values. But in this case, you'd probably just want to encrypt the client secret. You could also encrypt the client ID if you want to, but sometimes I like to see it just to know which client ID I used because I forget. But yeah, so this isn't like necessarily the most recommended way of doing it. It would just, if someone was to get these credentials, fortunately all they'd be able to do is pull people in and out of static groups, but that's still more than you probably want. So being able to encrypt those credentials is definitely ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once you encrypt this string, it's going to give you back a gigantic encrypted string to feed into this parameter field. But of course, this policy then needs to be scoped and to whom? To that same static group. So in practice, because this policy is self-service policy, the user is then going to see it pop up in self-service, and you all know the rest of that. That's all history. They'll be able to promote themselves. Once that period is over, they'll be removed from that static group, and we're good to go. But here's the thing. Right now, the way this tool is being set up is current best practices before the encryption tool comes out, in that it requires you to put sensitive credentials here in the parameter fields, and instead not in a configuration profile. Because technically you could put all of this right into a configuration profile, right? So this requires the launch a tool script for you to use these parameter fields, and it requires that configuration profile to be created in order for you to run this tool. Just to show you how versatile this is, you could just do away with the launch a tool script. So I made a copy of that policy, and we're no longer using that launch a tool script. Instead, we're doing a files and processes payload. If you go down to the bottom here, you'll see basically the same thing. You're calling the Rocketman binary directly, specifying the tool, and feeding in the same parameter information we had in that script payload. So the client ID, client secret, and of course your domain for the configuration profile. But all that means is we did away with the script depending on that payload. We could go a step further and just do away with the configuration profile entirely. So here's another policy here where you're also using a files and processes payload, but you're foregoing the configuration profile and instead feeding it all into the execute command field here. So same as the previous one where you see the tool name, the client ID, the client secret, the domain, and the action to promote, time min being 15 minutes, and the remove group being that static group we created. So if you wanted to go that route, you could, but just to show you a couple of the flexible ways you could go and execute a tool here without needing to go and create a configuration profile and so on and so forth. And that
Yeah,
is
question?
Yeah, I have two questions. The first question is, once the Mac gets removed, by running this, how does it get added back for the next time?
Yep. So
And
this is an on the request workflow. So let's say you had a policy where you're like, I don't want people to have admin access unless they request it with the help desk and someone manually puts them into that group. You could set up an API call too. So maybe it's a workflow through Slack or something else that would put them into that static group. But that's the idea is for this, we don't want users to be able to promote themselves to admin unless they've been approved to be able to do that. You could set this up in a way where you just scope it to all computers or scope a different policy to a specific department. Like let's say you want all your salespeople, you're like, they have to request access. They will mess things up. But your engineering team, you're like, oh, we're still making them standard users, but I'm going to give them unlimited chance to upgrade themselves to admins. We're just going to audit everything they do during that time and make sure they give a reason for why they're doing it.
Okay. The other question is, does it limit the admin access to certain boundaries, like not letting terminal session? Does it have that?
So the way we're doing it, it's not like Beyond Trust where I haven't actually used Beyond Trust, but I know it kind of works a little bit like that where they stay a standard user, but it gives them elevated privileges in some ways. This one does make them a full admin, so theoretically they can do anything, but because they're being managed by Jamf Pro, there's certain things that Jamf can do to limit them from doing stuff. So we're utilizing Jamf where you can just scope stuff to that same static group where we could say, hey, while they have this temporary admin access, they can't access terminal because we can do a restricted software policy, right, to be able to restrict them from accessing terminal. We can do a super restrictions configuration profile that makes sure they can't do most anything inside of system preferences that they would be able to do with admin access, especially like user accounts and groups to create that user account, or anything else under the sun that you can think of, like adding iTerm or other terminal-like applications to be able to do that. But we're somewhat limited in what we can do through Jamf Pro, and in some ways it's a cat and mouse game, right? To some extent, if they are admins, they can probably figure out a way to get around that stuff. So it's just limiting as much as we can so the users aren't going out and trying to do a bunch of stuff very easily. They have to try pretty hard then to get around the restrictions. Yep.
What did you set for your trigger?
Can you ask it into the box?
What'd you set for the trigger? And
Yeah, for this one, it's going to be self-service. So there's no trigger but self-service. For this workflow, we probably wouldn't do any other trigger but self-service. I don't see a point in doing like a recurring check-in, just because you don't know when that starts. And if we're doing temporary admin access for 15 minutes and the user happens to not be by their computer once that check-in hits, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So even though it's on request where they're requesting it from the help desk, we still want to start it when the user clicks that box.
so basically it's requiring interaction from somebody who has
Yeah.
access to scope this to their computer. It's not
Yeah.
unmanned.
Well, you could scope it to all computers and then make it on demand. So then you could set it up how you want to, right? And if it's on demand, then any user that wants to go in there can go in there anytime and select it as many times as they want to. Maybe we could, in the future, have like a limit so they can only do it so many times per day or per month. So it's like, hey, you only get it a couple times. I haven't seen anyone that has that request yet, but that's easily something we could add. Do you want to open up Terminal quick and just show like the help page inside of there? So this is a CLI utility like we showed before. So it has like a whole help page. So if you do like Rocketman -H, you're going to get all the list of tools that it has. Oh yeah, this is my computer. I'll show this. So, and this is our later version that we were working on, so you're going to see a little bit different than you'd see in the current version. But you'll see all the tools here, the different things that the tools do, linked to the specific GitHub page to get more information. If you want to look at a specific tool like temporary admin, you do sudo rocketman temporary admin-h. Did I mess that up? Of course, when you're typing live, you never get it right. Or is this not built into the new version yet? -- help. Yeah, okay. I guess we changed that to -- help in the new version. But now you can see like all the different things that you're able to do with this specific tool. So you can see like all the actions and stuff. You can also do this through this is all available on the wiki as well, but just to show you, this is a fully fledged CLI tool. If you find ways to be able to use that, so you could write a script that uses this inside of another script that you wrote if you wanted to use it that way. The goal of building RCC for us has been we want to migrate away from bash scripts as much as possible. We still use bash scripts in our client servers, but we're trying to get away from them as much as possible, especially in our really complex tools that were like thousands of lines of code, difficult to manage. One person in the company knew how that actually worked, and it was just a total mess. So with this, it's much easier to manage all those tools, but they can be used in conjunction with bash scripts you've already had if you wanted to create a complex workflow through it. Cool. Any other questions that anyone has before we move back to the presentation? Well, a couple last things I want to talk about. Let me just bring this up. So, do a shameless plug for our Launchpad meetup. We have a meetup once a month where we go over the latest Apple and Jamf updates. It's on the first Friday-ish of every month, depending on how we feel about that Friday versus the next Friday. And it's an hour long, around noon Mountain Standard Time. We go over just like general updates for the first 15 minutes, get a guest presenter to talk about a new tool or a new workflow or just something cool that they've been working on. And then have a Q&A at the end. So if you're interested and have not heard about that yet, it's just rocketman.tech/launchpad to sign up for the mailing list and get added to that. It's completely free and it's remote, so wherever you are in the world, as long as it's some time that makes sense at noon Mountain Standard Time, which not everywhere does. I've tried to get guest presenters from Australia and they're like, I do not want to do 4 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm like, that makes sense. But yeah, so sign up for that. We'd love to have you. And let's stay in touch. So here is our Slacks, our emails, as well as the Mac Admin Slack channel for Rocketman Command Center. You can go ahead and sign up for that. Cool. We have 3 minutes left, but I won't take all of your time. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for all the amazing questions. We'll stay up here if you have any more questions. And have an amazing rest of the conference.